So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to have the return of a fantastic guest. She joined me about 7 years ago. It is the fantastic Sarah Greene. How is life with you? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Matthew, and it's lovely to talk to you again. Yes, I've been very busy. That's how life is. It's always busy. For the last 8 years now, have taken over the running of a company that my late husband, Mike Smith, set up called Flying TV to do with aerial filming and television filming, feature films, commercials, corporates, you name it, we do it all over the world now. And that has been a very steep learning curve. And the reason that we can do that is all down to the absolute skill and brilliance and just the really extraordinary skill set of my right hand woman, a lady called Monica Wire, who I'm so lucky to have in my life. She makes that possible. I fly the desk, she does the rest. It's really now the wheels or the wings are flying, the wheels on that have been turning really well. And I have felt in myself as well more ready to go back to television. And I've probably been feeling that way for the last year or so, I suppose. And some of the things that came along, I wouldn't really have wanted to do. And other things I've grabbed hold of, like Would I Lie to You? I did a comedy, a comedy program, one of the series that Lucy and John do, Meet the Richardsons, for Dave Channel, and those kind of quirky things that I know that I would enjoy. And then right out of the blue, along came an offer to co-host a new quiz show for BBC One. And that's not something I've done before. I mean, I've done sort of quizzes on Saturday mornings, and I've certainly been a contestant on quiz shows like The Chase and Richard Osman's House of Games and those sorts of things, which I find completely terrifying to be a contestant on them. But this was something totally different, to be the sort of Richard Osman on Pointless character in a new show called The Finish Line. And when I saw the format on paper, well, on email, first of all, I thought this sounds really good. This ticks all my boxes of being on paper quite a straightforward format, very easy to follow, very easy to go, but in its execution has all sorts of elements built into it. It has suspense built into it. It has a sort of addiction, if you like, compulsion about it. And I just loved it. And I said, yeah, I'd really, really like to go for this. And fortunately, that all happened. We recorded in Belfast a couple of months ago, and now it's started to go out on BBC1. And it's a strange thing, because for
I was
someone
going
like
to
me who's done live all my life, there it is, it's all recorded, it's done and dusted, and there's nothing I can do about it.
I was going to say I watched a couple of the episodes the other day, and it's so good. And you saying about the kind of the pointless Richard Osman feel, that's exactly kind of where I saw yourself and Roman, kind of like it did have that sort of feel to it. I mean, did you know from the sort of the get-go that Roman Kemp would be co-presenting with you, or was that kind of a surprise that came along later?
I knew that he was in the running. Yes, I knew that he was in the running. And when I heard that he was in the running, I thought, well, yeah, he will get this, definitely. And so that was a joy. He is, as you know, the host of the Capital Radio Breakfast Show. And again, that was Mike Smith's job when I first knew him. So he not only comes from good stock parentally, but career-wise as well.
I mean, as well, I must say, as you know, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, thoroughly recommend checking it out because it is fantastic. If you're into your quizzes, you're going to love this one. But also, you get to sit down, which is always, I imagine, nice on a job when you can sit down and kind of just
It's
watch.
never happened before. It's this. This is the first. This is absolutely a first. And I said, "Well, don't you want me to walk around at all?" This I said, "Because I can. I'm able to do that." And and he said, "No, no, we want you there. We want you literally in that Richard Osman type role. We want you sat there. We want you in a position where you can oversee everything, where the contestants can have eye contact with you, and you with them." And it's a I'm so glad you like it, Matthew. I mean, I'm not forcing you into a corner to say that you do, but you've already sort of said that. um I think it's really extraordinary because it's such a shiny floor type show. Anyone who hasn't seen it, I mean, this set, it sparkles, it really does, and that's the whole point of it. And yet there's something really intimate and friendly and warm about it. And I don't know how they've achieved that. It's such a clever format. I know the guys who spent a long time developing it. I mean, I'm talking years rather than months developing it.
So, I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen the show yet, obviously the finish line, kind of talk us through a little bit about the premise because it's a great show. Like you said, it's got an amazing studio. So just talk us through the sort of the premise a bit first.
Well, apparently, the genesis of it was the old fairground horse racing game. So imagine you've got 5 slots, if you like, except that this is all blown up to giant size. So they are tracks that run down the length of a studio. And each of those 5 is for the 5 contestants per show. And there is a finish line at the end. And each of those tracks has a moving podium on it. And that podium, the closer it gets to the finish line, you make it through to the next round. And if you are the last in that race, then you are out. So we have the elimination process from 5 down to 1. And it's down to 1 because the very last race is against the track itself. And that is because each of those tracks is an absolute lit up board game of joy. They can be programmed to do anything you like. But in our case, at the end, that track is chasing the person on their podium down the track. Where if they get the correct answer, you move. If you get it wrong, you stop. But how do you know what lane you're going to be on? Well, that's because you have to do qualifying rounds. So there are essentially 3 qualifying rounds, 3 races, then a head-to-head, where you've got the final 2 against each other. That's on the podiums again, but on the buzzers. So you've got a buzzer challenge as well. And then finally, that amazing race against the track itself. And if you beat the track, if you get to the finish line, you get all your questions right, or maybe you get one wrong, but it's catching you up, but then you manage to move again, you win £5,000. That's it in a nutshell. Each of the qualifying rounds is quite interesting and fun. They're quite different. So you get different skills tested, if you like, in the qualifying rounds. But there's plenty of time to get to know each contestant. And I think that's quite an important element of it. I never forget a wonderful woman, an American woman who'd been involved in, well, she was an author, but she had been involved in television in America for quite a while. And she always said to me, the most important thing about game shows and quiz shows is you've got to care who wins the super toaster. So it doesn't matter what they're winning, you've got to care about them. You've got to know something about them. And in 45 minutes, for that number of elements, And for that number of guests, it has to move pretty fast. And I think that's the other thing about it. It really does move quite quickly.
I mean, it must be great getting to know the contestants and being able to spend that sort of time with them. And then, if they win at the end, being able to sort of see how, how excited they are about it, and knowing it, in some cases it can make a real difference to their lives, that money.
Yes, yes. It really had that very satisfying element to it for us, I think, particularly for me, because I'm a very nosy person. And I did find myself getting involved with the stories that they were telling and being on the edge of my seat. And the really weird thing is, and I promise you, I'm not just saying this, I'm rewatching the episodes as they go out now. I say rewatching, I haven't seen them. I've just done them. But I was on the edge of my seat in the studio, caring about each one. I actually mostly wanted all of them to win, but that couldn't happen, of course. But there were some people who really sort of, I don't know, you found that you wanted them to win. You keep that to one side, of course, when it comes to questions and answers, but you do know what a difference it's going to make to their lives. And I'm going through it all now again, watching them. It's like seeing them for the first time, and I can't believe it. I'm watching with my other half, and he's saying, "No, but you've seen this before." And in fact, he came over to Belfast for the last couple of days, and so he saw about 8 of the shows being made. And one of those went out. I think it was yesterday's show, and he said, "I don't know what it is, but I'm suspending disbelief that I don't know who wins, but I don't have to do that because it's so exciting." And you always know in a studio that you might be onto a good thing when all the members of the crew are watching intently out from behind all the cameras and the equipment in the studio, and there are no phones out, there are no newspapers out. They're actually intent on watching the show, because you kind of care about it and you care about the contestants.
And I mean, did you get to have a go on the platform Did it look like a lot of fun?
I kept asking and asking. And then just before, the last day, just before they took the set down, they said, come on, Roman, come on, Sarah, have a go on it. And it was hilarious. I loved it. I loved it. I'd want to whiz them off the tracks though and take it all around the studio.
Now, I mean, how many episodes are there for us to look forward to? And do we know yet whether there might be another series? Because I think there has to be.
Well, you just tell all your friends to watch. Please, iPlayer is great because if people watch on iPlayer, which is often much more convenient as well, especially if they're at work during the day, then that rating goes winging its way straight to the BBC digitally. There's no waiting for overnight figures. They get those immediately. So iPlayer is a great thing. And if you wanted to binge watch all five of the week's episodes over the weekend, that is a very good way to do it as well. We've made 25, but what I can't quite work out is why it said, when I went on to it said, on the first show, it said 1 of 30. So unless they've cut a load together, which I don't think you could do with this particular format, I thought it was 25, and I'm sticking with that. So we've got, what have we got? 5 weeks worth of it. And yes, you see, the more people that watch, the more likely it is to get recommissioned. I hope so, for all sorts of reasons, mainly because I just enjoyed it so much. It reminded me of all the reasons that I love working in television. It really did. And being in Belfast was the icing on the cake, because it's a city that I love. Not that I got to see very much of it, but a lot of it came into the studio, I mean, I'm not saying all the contestants from Belfast, they weren't, just I think we had a handful. They're very, very careful these days about getting people from all over the UK, and beyond if possible. But it's a set that lends itself to diversity. You do not have to be mobile on your legs to take part in this show. And that might sound like a strange thing to mention, but it's hugely important. And we found that it you know, it freed up a whole area of life for people who were coming in either using wheelchairs or, you know, having different movement. And it I don't know, it very gently, it's moved everything forward, this show, I think.
I mean, one other option for the additional 5 episodes. I mean, were there many bloopers? Could we end up with some blooper episodes?
Ah, okay. Yes, is the short answer to that. But sneak preview of that, I've noticed that the Finish Line production have set up a Twitter, I'm sorry, I don't like to say X, a Twitter account.
It is
Um,
Twitter. Everyone calls it Twitter.
Thank you. I just so much prefer the friendly little white bird in the blue surround and the little blue bird to a monochrome X, which looks slightly scary, I think. I really do. Never has a kiss look less inviting. But anyhow, I digress. Anyway, they've set up an account, which is either BBC Finish Line or Finish Line BBC. I think it's Finish Line BBC. And they are very cheekily showing some of the funniest answers to questions already. So I think there might be a chance to pull some of those together, certainly. Yeah.
I mean, when you do a show like that, I imagine there are a lot of moments when, you know, the camera has to stop rolling. Because, I mean, do you ever have fits of laughter? Are you good at sort of controlling that, or does that
Oh
just come out?
gosh. Yeah, I have them all the time. But my speciality, which I'm sort of known for, not on screen, for reasons which will be very obvious to you, my speciality is making other people do that without going, what we call corpsing, without laughing when you're not meant to be laughing, myself. But what I really enjoy, again, going down that, I'm a bit of a prankster, is trying to make other people do that. So I would set Roman tasks in each show and say, right, Roman, you've got to get this word into the show. You've got to work in this word. If you can, you get special points. And he'd then set me words, really ridiculous words. And then whenever I came out with mine, which obviously I was able to meld into a sentence, that would be it. He'd have to start trying not to laugh again. Or I would put in little things into the show that it would set him off. And all that's very enjoyable, as long as everybody gets to, I mean, you know, I don't think you should do it if it becomes self-indulgent, but if the other contestants can enjoy it to a degree as well, and then he does laugh, and then I can make fun of him, and then that's shared with the audience. That's what I like. Now, a lot of those moments, because of the fast-moving, densely packed nature of the show, have had to be cut out, but some of those might make it into a blooper show, you know. The other thing I'm really hoping is going to be possible are for celebrity or themed specials, because I've already cast quite a few of those shows in my head. The people that I'd love to see, and of course the nature of that set being all about lights, you can make those lights do anything you want. So you can change the look of it. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of separate little lights in that show. So if you want to put photographs on there and bring them to life with lights, you can do it. We did it for the 60th birthday of one of the crew members, and we had his picture all over it, and birthday cakes and all sorts for when we broke for lunch once. They just managed to do it. So if you can do it for that, you can do it for comic relief specials, children in need, Eurovision. I mean, can you imagine a drag race version?
That would be
I mean, I've
amazing.
already cast the drag queens. I already have.
I also think you'd have to have Martin Kemp on there, of course. Um, and I'm feeling Rylan would be fantastic for that show. I think he'd be great on there.
Yes, yes, yes. I think you're absolutely right. Of course, when Roman and I have been asked about who we'd like to have on the celebrity specials, and I'm not saying this is incestuous, but it is. He thinks there should be a whole, like the whole game the 5 contestants should all be Kemps. I said, all right then, okay, we've got Gary, we've got Martin, we've got Shirley. I guess we've got you, but be careful because whoever takes over from you might be, kept. And then who's your other Kemp? He said,
You'd have
oh,
to
I'd
have
have
Ross.
Ross. He'd import him just for that show. The Kempest show on earth, we call it.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I'm so hoping that happens eventually.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, because I know that I think it was last year, there was a time capsule that got put down under the BBC back in the 80s, I believe it was, and that got unearthed. So what was that like to kind of have that come back? Maybe not necessarily expecting it to come back quite so soon, but what was that like?
Well, it was a massive anticlimax, if you must know, because the whole box fell apart. This was on. They wanted to cover it on This Morning, because their studio is in what was BBC Television Centre, and this time capsule had been buried in the concrete of the then brand new multi-story car park. Only BBC, I mean, I beg your pardon, only Blue Peter could have the kind of vision that they wanted to bury a time capsule in a car park in concrete. And I remember the day that we did this, and it was quite lovely because it had been filled with artifacts, drawings, sweet wrappers of the day, all from the local primary school, just up the street. And they got members of that same primary school back, the people who buried. The weird thing is, one of the kids who'd come from the primary school back in 1982, I think it was, he had been partly responsible for building the car park. When I say building, I mean designing what was now going to happen there, which is actually its home. They're going to be homes there. And they are, I can't remember what type of homes, because it's right on Wood Lane, but they're quite sensitively designed. And I think they are for people who have challenges in life, that there is care and assistance close by. So he had helped to bury a time capsule as a child in a multi-story car park that now, partly thanks to him, had been redesigned into care homes, which is just lovely. So he was there. When we opened, well, first of all, the box nearly fell apart, and inside, anything that had been paper had turned to a sort of rusting brown pulp. I mean, which really looked very, very nasty and didn't smell much better. The only thing that had lasted was a crisp packet, which is quite interesting. Yeah, for all that plastic pollution that we're suffering, crisp packet was still in its. It was still there, absolutely legible, and in one piece. And the other thing, what was the other thing that had lasted? Oh, just about a piece of film that was in there as well. But that was a very strange experience, really. But it was very nice that the local school children not only helped unveil and look at the old box that had fallen apart, but they were burying a new one, which was going to be indestructible, apparently, with all their stuff. So it's sort of the baton got passed on to the next generation.
Because am I right in thinking that as well, the plaque that marked where it was had been nicked as well?
Oh, had it? Yes, I think it had. I think it had, or it had just dropped off. I'm not sure. Maybe it had been nicked, but it certainly had fallen off the wall by some means or other.
Now, I just want to say before we go, I mean, obviously, radio is something that you've done in the past. Is it something you're still getting to do, or do you want to get back to radio? No, what's that? How's that going?
Well, it's time, really. I mean, you know how I feel about radio, Matthew. I feel it's the greatest form of entertainment on the planet. And I think that people who do radio well are much cleverer than people who do television well. I think radio is the hardest of all, but it's also the most enjoyable. And I had been doing BBC Radio Berkshire, but then I'd been filling in for them, and they asked if I would like to stay on and do a daily show there, which was lovely to be asked. But I physically there just aren't enough hours in the day for me with everything else that goes on in my life. But I love audio. I would love to do some more books on tape. I say tape, see, that dates me. Audio books. I have done some podcasts with people. I did a podcast with Michael Fenton Stevens last year, weirdly called My Time Capsule. How about that? But no, if the right slot came up and there was enough air around, my life, some space to do it, I would love it. I would never say never. No.
Now, I just want to say, Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, people should watch The Finish Line on BBC iPlayer or on BBC One. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Of course, keep well, keep safe. And is there anything you'd like to say to people who are currently in hospital at the moment?
Yes, I'd like to say, please, I wish you wellness. I wish you healing. I wish you only good things. And my thoughts are with you and with your families as well.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.